modifier on it, and I've just basically scaled it and got the amount of strength to the right sort of level to give me the kind of flexing and wobbling around that I want for these bubbles. So you can see they twitch and wobble around there quite nicely. If I look at what else is in the scene, you'll see that there are 4 different particle flows. You can see I've moved their icons so they don't overlap each other here. Although in each case they're always emitting their particles off these tablets. So their position in the scene doesn't really matter in this case. It's just being able to select them, which is why I've actually moved them like this. We have gravity. That's actually using a negative strength value. And that's actually working to produce buoyancy on the bubbles, and that's just to pull them back towards the surface. So in this case I'm using gravity to do a sort of anti-gravity effect, to actually, like I said, make the bubbles float upwards. We've got the usual winds. I've got a wind small and a wind large, and that's again to produce a sort of chaotic effect in the bubbles. And we've got drag set to start on -500, end on 900, and I'm using these values here, 666. And that's about it really. In terms of the motion of the bubbles, I'm using as you can see, I've got a speed by icon operator in the flow, and I've animated it in a zigzagging manner, and that's to give a bubble motion effect to the particles. And that's something that a lot of people who use the old particle systems in Macs really pine for. The ability to just switch on an option and have the particles move upwards in a sort of zigzaggy manner. You can do it just as easily in particle flow by using the speed by icon operator, and you can see that I've set up the animation here. You can see there it goes. It gives you that sort of bubbling motion, and I'm just using that on the particles, and it's relative to their birth time to make it the animation offset randomly. And that gives us a nice sort of bubbling motion as our particles go upwards. So we've got all these sort of random elements going together. I'll just close this group up again to producing our effect, and I'll just quickly run through all the different elements of the materials now, just to see what's going on there. You can see that we've got a gradient ramp here. This is actually just used in the background if you look at environment, and we've got this backdrop mapped in here. I'm using an environment map, and I've got it mapped to screen, so in other words it just maps on exactly the way you see it there to the background, and again it's just something to give us the semblance of being underwater, with the gradient getting lighter as you get towards the surface. I then copied that gradient, and I've used that again. It's turned to environment, but in this case it's set to spherical environment. And you can see I've made the extremes of it a little bit more contrasty. I've made the top of the gradient white, and I've made the bottom black. And that's actually used in this bubble material here, which is, if you go down here, you can see it's a ray trace material. It's using reflection and refraction are both ray traced. And you can see that in both it's using this bubble environment here. It's using this gradient ramp as its environment, which you can see it's actually showing up here, and that gives us this nice kind of refractive and reflective effect, as if it's actually reflecting and refracting this background gradient that we have in our effect. As I said, this material has reflection turned on and refraction, and they're both using ray tracing. One obviously is refractive, one's reflective, and I've used a value of 15, which kind of give the bubbles the right kind of lightness for the effect that I wanted. You can see I'm using quite a low glossiness, which you wouldn't really expect maybe, and a very high specular level, and that's just to give the bubbles really strong highlights, and that's to do with motion blur more than anything. None of the core systems of Macs at the moment, even in version 7, have a way of preserving the overbright colors in objects when they motion blur. And really what should happen is the really bright highlights on the bubbles should actually streak and maintain their brightness when they're blurred with motion blur, but they don't. They actually get smeared out and they become a sort of mid color. So to counteract that, I tend to put the specular level up very high and reduce the glossiness to make the highlights brighter. It's not necessarily realistic, but when you have motion blur that's not working realistically, you have to kind of counteract it by using that technique. In the effect, I've got a dissolving powder, and you can see I've got it 70% self-luminous. That's because at the end of the day, it's very, very translucent.